Have you ever witnessed a moment where genius defies all odds? Experts were unable to repair a complex ship engine until the admiral brought in the black daughter of a deceased and brilliant Navy veteran. The engine of the USS Destroyer failed exactly 48 hours before the most critical mission of the year. 5 experienced naval engineers, armed with state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment worth millions of dollars, remained completely stumped by the machine that stubbornly refused to work. "Impossible," Commander Watkins muttered for the 10th time in a row, wiping the sweat that insisted on beading on his forehead. "We've tested every individual component 3 times. Everything works perfectly when separated, but together," he gestured with growing frustration at the silent engine that mocked his incompetence. The tension in the hangar was palpable. Technicians ran back and forth, carrying reports that led nowhere. The noise of tools and computers created a chaotic symphony of professional despair. The deadline was fast approaching, and everyone knew that failure on this mission would have devastating consequences for their careers. Admiral Lawson watched the scene with growing concern. His 30 years of naval experience screaming that he needed a radical solution. That's when a seemingly absurd idea crossed his mind. A memory of the best engineer he had ever known. "Bring Maya Clark," he ordered suddenly, taking everyone by surprise. Watkins raised his eyebrows in disbelief. "Sir, Maya Clark is only 16 years old. And she's also the daughter of Brandon Clark, the best naval engineer this Navy ever had," Lawson replied with a coldness that cut through the air. "Brandon died last year in an industrial accident. But before that, he trained his daughter from the age of 8. If anyone can solve this, it's her. Are you ready for the twist that changed everything?" The awkward silence that followed was broken by Watkins' sarcastic, disbelieving laugh. "With all due respect, Admiral, are we really going to entrust our most advanced military equipment to a teenager?" Maya Clark had literally grown up surrounded by dismantled engines, rusty screwdrivers, and the constant smell of machine oil that permeated every corner of her makeshift home workshop. While other kids her age played with dolls or video games, she spent hours fascinated by her father as he diagnosed complex mechanical problems that left trained engineers completely stumped and scratching their heads in despair. Brandon Clark wasn't just technically brilliant. He had an almost supernatural intuition with machines, as if he could hear their innermost whispers. His calloused hands seemed to have a silent conversation with every piece of metal, every wire, every component he touched. And Maya absorbed every movement, every technique, every secret he shared with infinite patience. "Machines have souls, little one," he would say as he dismantled complex engines with the precision of a surgeon. "You just have to learn their language, and when you do, they'll tell you all their secrets." By the age of 12, Maya could identify specific faults in engines just by listening to the sounds they made, a skill that impressed even the experienced technicians who occasionally visited Brandon's workshop. At 14, she secretly helped her schoolmates fix broken cars, solving problems that professional mechanics charged hundreds of dollars to diagnose. By 16, after her father's sudden and tragic death in an industrial accident that shook the entire naval community, she had become the only person alive who truly understood and mastered the unique and revolutionary methods Brandon had meticulously developed over decades of experience. But this was something that absolutely no one at the naval base knew or suspected. When Maya finally entered the freezing hangar, carrying only a faded and battered school backpack, the looks of disdain and disbelief were instant and brutal. A skinny black teenager wearing sneakers with holes in the sides, surrounded by white men in impeccable uniforms and military equipment that cost more than entire houses. "Are you serious?" whispered one of the technicians to his colleague next to him without even trying to hide his contempt. "Are we going to lose our most important mission because of forced diversity and political correctness?" "Next thing we know, they'll be bringing in a dog to solve engineering problems," muttered another, provoking muffled giggles from the group. Maya heard every poisonous word, every prejudiced comment, but her face remained completely impassive. She had learned early on that the best response to prejudice and ignorance was not words or heated arguments. It was absolute, irrefutable competence. Her eyes scanned the engine with a laser-like intensity that only exists in those who have faced constant doubts about their abilities their entire lives and not only survived but thrived to prove everyone wrong. As the engineers silently mocked her presence, something extraordinary began to happen. Can you believe what happens next on Black Voices? If you're enjoying this story of overcoming prejudice, don't forget to subscribe to Black Voices to find out how a simple 16-year-old girl was about to teach those men a lesson in humility that they would never forget for the rest of their careers. Maya slowly approached the engine, completely ignoring the poisonous whispers and looks of disdain that followed her like shadows. Watkins crossed his arms, flashing a condescending smile that made his opinion of the diversity charade the admiral had imposed clear. "All right, girl," Watkins said with theatrical patience that barely concealed his irritation. "I'll explain it in simple terms so you can understand. This is an LM-2500 engine used in advanced military ships. 5 engineers with decades of experience have already tried to fix it. But if you'd like to take a look." The technicians around them chuckled softly, exchanging knowing glances. For them, this was just an exercise in patience until reality put this presumptuous teenager in her place. Mia opened her worn backpack and took out a small polished bronze rod identical to the one her father always carried. The simple object provoked new waves of muffled laughter throughout the hangar. "She brought a magic wand," muttered one of the technicians, provoking more giggles. "Maybe she can turn the engine into a chariot." What none of them knew was that this seemingly primitive rod had diagnosed more mechanical failures in 2 decades than all the computerized diagnostic equipment in that hangar could in a lifetime. Maya had grown up hearing stories about how her father was ridiculed by his colleagues when he started using old-fashioned methods in the Navy. Brandon Clark had learned acoustic diagnostic techniques from his own grandfather, a locomotive mechanic in the 1940s who could identify problems just by putting his ear to the right piece of metal. "Machines don't lie, kid," Brandon used to say as he taught Maya to interpret every vibration, every metallic whisper. "People lie all the time. Reports lie. Computers can be programmed to lie. But the sound of a broken machine, that's always honest." At age 8, Maya already knew that a worn bearing produced a frequency of 847 Hz, while a misaligned shaft created specific harmonics that changed with speed. By 12, she could diagnose problems that technicians with thousands of dollars worth of equipment couldn't detect. But Brandon had died, taking with him not only his technical secrets, but also specific, devastating knowledge about that exact model of LM-2500 engine. "Listen here, kid," Watkins interrupted, his patience wearing thin. "Let's not waste any more time with this charade. We have military protocols to follow. We're not playing backyard mechanic." Maya finally spoke, her calm voice cutting through the air like a knife. "Start the engine." "Absolutely not," Watkins replied categorically. "I'm not going to risk millions of dollars worth of military equipment to satisfy the fantasy of a girl who's probably never seen an engine like this in her life." "Then how do you expect me to diagnose the problem without hearing the engine run?" Maya asked, her simple logic creating a momentary silence. Watkins sighed deeply as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Fine. 15 seconds of idling. Nothing more. And when you fail, I want you out of here and never to return." What Watkins didn't know was that 15 seconds was exactly the amount of time I needed to identify the sound pattern her father had discovered during his final months. A specific manufacturing defect that affected only one batch of LM-2500 engines produced between 2018 and 2019. Brandon had discovered the problem 3 days before he died, but never had the chance to report it officially. The knowledge died with him except for one person who had been at his side in that workshop when he finally understood the pattern. As the technicians reluctantly prepared the engine, Mia positioned the bronze rod against the metal chassis and closed her eyes. For a moment, the memory of her father came vividly to mind, his calloused hands guiding hers, his voice whispering, "Feel the vibration. Don't just listen. Every machine has a unique signature, like a fingerprint." Watkins watched with his arms crossed, already mentally calculating how he would explain to the admiral that this ridiculous charade had been a complete waste of time. His colleagues shared the same sentiment, some already typing sarcastic messages about the situation. What none of them realized was that Maya wasn't just trying to diagnose a broken engine. She was about to avenge the memory of a brilliant father who had been underestimated and ignored by the same arrogance she now faced. As the engine started to run and the familiar vibrations ran through the bronze rod to her trained ears, something extraordinary began to happen. Not only in the diagnosis forming in her mind, but in the expression of absolute concentration that made some of those present realize